Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's great to be with you all, wherever you might be based. I'm assuming that a lot of you might be based in different parts of the country at the moment. I'm coming to you from lockdown Melbourne. So if anyone is in Melbourne, a special shout out to you. I know it's particularly tough at the moment. We've been through a hard lockdown. It's potentially a couple of weeks away from hopefully changing for the better. So hopefully wherever you are, you're able to feel a little bit well in these tough times. And I guess that's why this conversation today is so important. We know that Are You OK Day is coming up, and trying to ask the question of others is extremely important when we're trying to support people around us, know the signs and symptoms to look out for when we're talking about stress and mental health. So that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about today. Just so you know, whilst I do a lot of this work, I'm not immune to the stresses that come into everyday life. I know for me, sleep has been affected just a little bit, probably because I've been looking at the news a lot more than perhaps normal. We know that the news is always negative, generally speaking, before COVID, but of course at the moment, often what we do when we're a bit tired or fatigued, we kind of, or look hoping for good news, we scroll through the news looking for that glimmer of hope, but we get bombarded with these negative messages. So what we're putting our time and attention on can affect our mental health. So once I was aware of that, the sign was that sleep was getting a bit affected. I was able to pull back, focus on well-being a bit more, and just have plenty of disconnection time from the news. So this stuff is affecting us all at the moment, and today is a really good chance to pause and reflect on what's going on for you at the moment, in addition to thinking about how we can help others. Just so you know a bit about me, I worked in financial services for many years in Melbourne and then in the UK, moved into the fintech startup world, but always worked pretty hard, played pretty hard. And that resulted in me experiencing my own burnout. If anyone's experienced burnout or anxiety, panic, anything like that, it's really tough at the time. And that was my experience. But whilst it was tough, looking back on that experience, it was a good way for me to really slow down and focus on what was important. Well-being for me and mental health wasn't something I'd really ever thought of. So once I was able to find some great tools to find my way through that period, I was able to start to really thrive in my career. So I was facing my own personal crisis at the time that helped me discover some of the tools which I'm going to talk you through today. So I will just get up the presentation just so I can take you through some of these tools and you've got a bit of a visual to look at. Alrighty, ready to go. So what I've called today's session is effectively a stress temperature check-in. And that means that we can all effectively check in with our own stress, or how high our own stress levels are, in order to be well and to help others. Often with Are You OK Day, while it's a fantastic concept, the temptation is to think about helping others first. But in reality, we all suffer from stress, whether it be everyday stressors, high levels of stress. So we need to think about helping ourselves first and ensuring that we're in a calm zone before we're really in the best place to help others. So the tools that I'm taking you through today are for you, but also will obviously be useful to help others as well. And then I'll talk a little bit towards the end about specific things you can do in terms of having that Are You OK conversation. I've given you a bit of information about me, but I've been working with Pinnacle Health Group, who I know you've probably been doing some other work with on other things to do with overall well-being. I have a background, as I said, in the corporate world, so I have an understanding of what mental health means when you're trying to, meet bottom line deadlines or targets, get projects done and completed. So it's good to understand the reality of what's going on in your workplaces, but also in your personal life. And when we're thinking about mental health, I retrained, did a psychology master's, trained helping people in counselling from an anxiety perspective. So people tend to use me for building mental health in the workplace, learning to help others, because I've got that corporate background, but also that psychology understanding as well. I've worked with a range of organisations around the country in healthcare, financial service and government. So I bring a lot of those learnings into all the work I do. So what we're going to talk about is your reality, first of all. It's good to talk about being okay, but often we need to really slow down and think, well, what is the reality of my situation that I'm in at the moment? What stressors, what triggers are coming up for me that might be influencing my mental health or influencing other people to ensure that they're getting to a place where they're not feeling okay? Often underlying all this stuff is stress. So we're going to talk about normal stress versus problematic stress. Stress often gets a bad name, so it's not always bad, of course. We need to know when it is useful, but also when it starts to become problematic in ourselves so we can better identify it in other people. We're then going to take our stress temperature so we're in a better position to regulate our own stress response, but also see where others might be on the scale. We'll go through what your warning lights might be, that if you are getting up to the higher end of the stress temperature scale, so you can also spot them in others. We'll talk about a couple of, or some key wellbeing anchors that you can do in your daily life just to help lower your stress temperature, and that might then also encourage others to do the same, or give you the confidence to be able to have those conversations with others. What we're trying to do today is really develop that calm confidence in yourself so that you can actually have the confidence to have those "are you okay" conversations. Often we're thinking, I've got to go into the "are you okay" conversation, but we're kind of busy, fatigued and stressed ourselves, which makes it a lot harder, and it makes those conversations more uncomfortable for everyone involved. And then I'll go through some specific tips around having that conversation, as I said at the start. So in terms of the reality for us all at the moment, we've got all these old challenges that we encounter every day. So people around you will be encountering the same things. But I like to get people to think about, what is your vision for how you would like to be in the face of stress, or how you would like to see people around you? And I use the tree metaphor because we know that the winds of change will blow. We know that we're going to get buffeted at the top of the tree. But if our trunk and core is strong, if our roots are firmly embedded in the ground, then we can kind of bend and flex with the winds of change. So when I'm helping others, I often talk to them about how they would like to be in the face of the stresses they are feeling, because that can be a nice goal to work towards. But also, if you're doing this yourself, if your core is strong and you're feeling that calm confidence, as I said, you're going to be in a stronger place to help others and have meaningful conversations. So there's a whole lot going on at the moment in our world. These are kind of everyday challenges. So as you're sitting there listening, whatever part of Australia you're from or listening from, just have a think about what your challenges are. For you, they might be work related, they might be home, because we know that if there's stuff going on at home, that will impact us how we are at work, and vice versa. Of course, when we're in the COVID world, where a lot of us are working from home, that line between work and personal is even more blurred. So there's even a more obvious overlap than perhaps there was before. So conflict comes up. It can be at home, it can be with the kids, it can be with our partner, it can be with working relationships. It can be frustration, maybe not trying to connect, not being able to connect with people in the same way we could before. There's a lot of benefits, of course, to virtual working. We're able to do this today, for example. Work-life balance is something we often hear about. I think with people working from home, it's been a lot of opportunity to get rid of the commute. But then, as I said, the lines between when do I stop work and be at home and relax can get blurred because the environment doesn't change. So some people are telling me they're logging on longer, in getting on earlier in the morning and logging off later at night. So things to think about. There's a huge amount of economic pressures. No business that I've really spoken to isn't feeling the pinch in some form. So those challenges of restructures are always in the back of our mind. There's general stress of work, competing demands, overwhelm. So there's some of the everyday factors that are good to think about for yourself and others. And of course, then there's COVID specific challenges that are coming up. The blurred lines, as I said, survivor guilt to a lot of people who are in work or haven't been affected perhaps in the way that some others have, feeling a bit guilty. It's like, well, my world's pretty okay. My well-being's going all right. My work's secure. And that can cause another form of tension in terms of not being able to relate to other people or feeling guilty as a result of it. Grief, anger and frustration due to isolation, restrictions, loss of things that we could do before that we can't do now, not being able to see loved ones, worried about perhaps our older grandparents, parents who might be more vulnerable at the moment. Homeschooling, that's a particularly big one at the moment in Victoria for parents. The school is out, and so that is a huge challenge, trying to be a full-time parent but also do a full-time job or do a full day's work, I should say. Isolation, we're hardwired as people to connect with each other. And so when we can't have that physical contact, it takes its toll. So we've got to think about other things we can do to compensate. I've talked about news overload, constantly scrolling through social media as an issue. And when we're constantly switching our mind on and worrying in that worry mode, we've got to think about ways to dial that back. And of course, the overall uncertainty from a global perspective that we can't avoid. So it's good to have a think about where you are in terms of your reality with all this stuff as a starting point to then be able to have those are you okay conversations with yourself first and foremost, but also with others. So I'll just pause for a moment just to ensure that I'm not racing through too quickly. But this next slide is what I call your stress temperature or your well-being temperature. And it can be really useful, or what I say, often with these, when I'm doing this work, is wouldn't it be great if we could wake up in the morning, put a thermometer under our tongue and take our stress temperature? Because if we knew where we were on the scale, we might be able to make different choices. So for example, if we woke up and we're in kind of red zone in high stress, we might think about not taking on that extra project at work. We might make sure that we're going out, taking our breaks at lunchtime. We might get our partner to support us better, helping the kids this week or doing the homeschooling, just because we know we're kind of at our limit. So when I'm talking this slide through, I want you to all have a think about where you are on this scale, but also where other people in your life might be, because if we're able to relate to it ourselves, we might start to better see it in others to be able to then jump in and go, do you need more support? Are you okay? How are you doing? So down the bottom, in that green zone, I call it mindful living. And mindful living is that lovely calm zone where we're not worried about all the things in the future, all those what if scenarios. We're not worried about the past, all the things that have gone wrong. We're just able to be really present in the moment. So if you're sitting there listening to this, you're able to relax, not think about too much. You're able to focus on what we're talking about without all the worries going through the mind. And that's really important because when we're in that zone, the nervous system is calm, thoughts are a lot slower. It's associated with innovation and creativity, and our digestion and immune system is working really well. So we need plenty of time in green. The second zone, or when we go up the scale, when the stress starts to rise, we might go into yellow zone. So we're busy but well. So we might have a lot going on, all the challenges that I've mentioned, but we're still sleeping well. We're doing our exercise, we're eating pretty well. So we're connecting with people. So we've got plenty of outlets to diffuse any of the stress that might be a bit building. So that, again, a lot of us are busy, but we're doing okay. So we've got enough balance in our life to counteract any of the stresses or the triggers. But I often say the line between busy but well and stress can be hard to define and hard to find. So you may all recall sitting at your desk for a long period of time, being on your feet all day, depending on what your role is. You get a bit of a backache, you feel tired, fatigued, sore eyes, tension, headache, clenched jaw, neck tension, whatever it may be. But often what we do when we get these symptoms, which indicate perhaps our stress temperature is going up, we then reach for the coffee, or we reach for a Panadol, or we try and get that sugar fix, and we just push through. And I'm not saying never have a coffee or do any of that, because I love my coffee just as much as the next person. But what we're doing, if we do that too much, we're overriding the warning signs our body is giving us. So when we do that constantly, little by little, we're just hiking up our stress temperature. And that can put us into the red zone of stress, anxiety, burnout. And so problematic stress is when we start to actually get into a zone whereby our mind is constantly on, that we're constantly analysing. It's going into the what ifs, all the what ifs. What will happen today? What's going to happen with COVID? How will my kids be at school? Will they catch up if they're being homeschooled? All that what if rumination. So it's important to think about when stress starts to become problematic, because when we get into red zone, we're moving into that survival mode. And survival mode really means that there's no difference between being in survival mode, thinking about a worrying thought, or being chased by a vicious dog in the street. So it's that flight or fight response kicking in. And that means we're not calm. The body's revved up. it's not working as efficiently as it should because it's constantly fueled by adrenaline, and that puts a lot of pressure on our mind and body over time. So we need to do what we can to ensure we're getting in closer to green as much as possible. So checking in with our stress temperature allows us to think about where we are, but also see where others might be on the scale. And once we kind of know where we are, we can then make different choices. I'll just move my screen out of the way just to make sure you can see that full slide. And I would also say that we're not always in one color. So we might go in a range throughout the week. So we might be green, we might be mindful, feeling well. We might dip into yellow, that busy but well zone, or we could be busy but well dipping into red. So have a think about what your range is, because when you know you're going higher, that's when you can start to make different choices. As I said, in green, it's important to have plenty of time there because that's the innovation zone. We can problem solve. We can be really creative around problems if that's what we wake up in one day or we're feeling calm. It's great for immune boosting time because we're not in survival mode. So the body's relaxed and all those important processes within the body can kick in. You might recall working really hard and then going on leave and suddenly you get sick. That's because we've been in survival mode and the immune system's been suppressed for so long, and then it kicks back in when we go on leave, which is a good thing, but then we get the physical symptoms of sickness when we start to fight off a bug, for example. In the yellow zone, if we realise we've got a bit of energy, a bit of stress in the system, which is not a bad thing, it means we can be more focused. We have the energy in the system for our senses to really be productive, to slam through some work, be focused, be efficient, really make decisions. So there's nothing wrong with being in that zone. We've just got to clock when it starts to become too much. Of course, when we get into red zone, that's when the anxieties can come in. We're easily triggered, we're more reactive, we're more grumpy, we get frustrated, it's harder to make decisions, it's harder to concentrate, those perfectionism traits can come in, we're more reactive. So we need to ensure that we're doing as much as we can to stay down or stay closer to green, because that's when we can start to make mistakes. Conflict comes up where we don't have clarity of thinking, and it's hard to solve problems because we're, again, in that survival mode. So hopefully you've been able to clock where you might be on the scale. And one thing I recommend you then do is to kind of figure out what your warning light is. So if you get a moment, if you've got some paper with you, perhaps you've got your phone with you, just start to jot down what some of your warning signs might be, because we all have them. Indicators that you are going up in terms of your stress temperature, as I sort of started to talk about before, are the physical symptoms of stress, but also the behaviors. So the physical symptoms of stress, I know for me, it's the heart starts to race, palpitations, I feel adrenaline surges, I get neck tension, headaches for some people, the clenched jaw, tightness in the throat, shortness of breath. That can be an indicator that things are starting to hike up. So it can be the physical symptoms, but it can also be changes in behavior, changes in how we are, how we plan, our thought patterns, and what we do or don't do. And that's important also for ourselves, because we can then go, oh, okay, hang on, I'm getting a bit snappy with my partner. What's going on here? You know, is life getting a bit too busy at the moment? But then we can also start to see it in others, and that's when we can ask the question, how are things going for you? Trying to pull them back into conscious awareness so they can then make decisions that they probably on some level know they need to be making to regulate their own stress response. Some of the other signs that I've put on the slide here are running late, being disorganized. So particularly if people are fairly organized, they're usually on time, they're fairly, you know, they're a good planner. But if there's changes in behavior that you start to see in yourself or others, that can be a sign that stress is building. The change in mood I've talked about, being irritable, withdrawing, being a little bit more distant and not as engaged, perhaps not as joking, as jovial as someone might normally be. Difficulty making decisions, can't decide between two choices, a classic sign that anxiety is building for people. The fatigue, whether it be mental tiredness or physical fatigue, not as engaged in conversations as perhaps they were before. Making mistakes also. So errors coming into work. I know for me with myself, if I read back an email I've drafted, a document I've prepared, you know, when I've been tired and I read it back the next day, I'm like, oh, that wasn't as coherent as I thought it might be. So that's another sign for me, but also a sign to look out for in others if we're thinking about when to have those "are you okay" conversations. So what I think about is we've taken our stress temperature, we've figured out what our reality might be. So we need to ensure we've got these key wellbeing anchors in place in our lives that we can use ourselves, but also to help others to ensure that we're just dropping down our stress temperature. So these wellbeing anchors I've put into 5 key ways. So check-in is the first one. We've talked about that. We're checking in with our stress temperature. These 5 are all important, by the way, because if we're not doing one, then it can kind of clog everything up and that the wheels of life don't turn as smoothly. So when we're checking in, we're bringing ourselves into conscious awareness, we're slowing down so that hopefully we're already releasing a bit of tension and going, oh, okay, if I'm spiking a bit here at the moment, need to slow down. And then we can again start to see it in others. Body or physical anchors are really important because they help burn off excess adrenaline. For example, if we're doing exercise, we're not having too much coffee to stimulate the nervous system, which provides fuel for worrying thinking or negative thinking. Whatever it might be for you, yoga, dancing, whatever your anchors might be, or for someone else you're supporting to remind them of, these are really important. If we go for a run, we often feel better because we're releasing endorphins as well as burning off excess adrenaline. So having these staple, non-negotiable practices in our daily life are key. Spirit anchors is another one that we can think about. So having disconnection time from social media and the news. We might want to ensure that we're connecting with people regularly around comedy nights, just catching up, having a laugh. There's nothing wrong whilst we're in a crisis to ensure that we're having enough downtime, not taking life too seriously, because that's, again, really important to get us closer to green. Mind anchors. Before I finish this session, I'll take you through a mindfulness tool that you can use, but we need to ensure we're doing plenty of things to slow our thinking down, so we're not on as a parent or not on at work, so we can slow those thought processes down. Again, that has a lovely calming effect on the nervous system. Reading or breathing can be other techniques, whatever it is for you. I know playing tennis for me, I can't do it at the moment. That can be a very mindful activity. Connection. So connecting with others is really important. So I get people to think about what is their network of support that they have. So might be their work colleagues who they can go to if their stress temperature is spiking. You might have your EAP provider, your employee assistance program, for some extra support if there's specific challenges that you're going through. Friends, so friends and family can be great, but we've got to make conscious choices as to who's going to be useful to us in a time of need, or to get out of our own head to go through a work problem. It might be a personal challenge or just a vent. And we might have certain friends that we vent to that can give us wise words of wisdom, or we might just want some friends that we have a relaxed, fun time with. So making conscious decisions around that, because if we're in a zone of red and then we're going to someone who's going to fuel our anxieties, we want to ensure we're not spending time with them whilst we're in red zone, for example. So hopefully that gives you some of the key anchors that I recommend people use for yourself primarily, so you can be closer to green, but also then there's suggestions that you can use to help others who might be in a tough spot if they're looking for some extra advice or support. So just a couple of checklists before I finish off with that mindful activity. As an organisation, we can test our own collective stress temperature. What is our state as an organisation? Are we so busy that we're kind of in a state of red ourselves collectively? If we're all in red zone, it makes it harder individually to get into green. Do we have frameworks in place at work to really ensure we're having these conversations or these check-ins regularly? Is there a stress temperature on the agenda, just so we can all check in the morning and go, yep, didn't sleep well, I'm in red zone, but I feel, and that can just help lower the stress temperature, and then we can offer support to each other. Someone's going to come into green one day, someone will be in red, but if we're able to have these open conversations, it's not personal, there's no judgment or blame, it's just about, okay, that's a reality, how do we support each other? We've got to identify our triggers at work or at home, the challenges that I've talked about. We've got to have proactive training calendars, because this is not a one-off conversation. True change happens when we revisit this stuff over time. And of course, we've got to monitor, measure, and follow up to test what's working and then do it again. The final checklist I was going to talk you through is just assessing your own relationship with stress. in terms of trying to offer support. So if you notice that someone is struggling, it could be a family member or someone else in your team at work. If you're slowed down, done your own stress temperature check-in, you're already getting closer to green. You might do a mindfulness activity to slow down. You might go for a run and then have the conversation because your nervous system's going to be calmer. You're practicing these tools yourself so that you can then trust your intuition more. If you're racing from meeting to meeting and you're really busy and you go and have this conversation, it's going to be a lot harder because you're not going to be as present or be able to listen as clearly. When we're trying to listen to someone, we've just got to ask, how are you going? And we might ask the next question, how has your week been? Because the automatic response is, yep, I'm doing fine. But sometimes we have to ask the follow-up question, okay, what's been happening for you this week? And that starts to get people to think a bit more about how they are going to then open up a little bit. And so we've got to ask these open-ended questions in order to try and really understand where someone might be at. It's good to listen and also not feel that you have to have all the answers. So asking what you can do. Often people, when they're in red zone, if they can start to talk, they start to get out of red down to orange and they start to remember what they need to do in order to get into green. So they might know their own wellbeing anchors. We might ask them, what would you normally do? Have you experienced this before? What do you normally do to try and feel a bit better? Or who do you reach out to? So we don't have to have all the answers when we're helping people. In fact, the temptation is to want to save or help people, and that's good, but it's often counterproductive. We need to give people the time, and of course, then refer them to an EAP program or offer other support if needed. But we've got to listen first and not feel the need to try and save them. Be aware of the help available, of course, offering a GP as an option, being there for them yourself as a regular check-in point, but also the EAP option as well, as I've said a few times, and just be an advocate for wellbeing, generally speaking, at work day to day, so that if someone is struggling, they might be more open to coming to you to talk about it. And of course, ultimately, we're just trying to be ourselves here and not make a conversation harder than it needs to be, because when we're all calm, we tend to know what we need to ask and the conversations become more real. So again, not necessarily easy stuff, but hopefully that helps as a starting point to have those "are you okay" conversations. In the spirit of getting into green, I thought I might just leave you with the short mindfulness activity just to see how you feel and see if you feel more confident after this activity to then lean into these conversations that we're talking about and to see if your stress temperature's dropped a little bit. So in the last few minutes, I'm just going to take you through a quick body scan. It's a mindfulness activity. If you've not done anything like this before, all I'm going to do is get you to relax all the muscles in your body from your feet to your head, just as a way, as I said before, to start to slow thinking down and calm the nervous system. So as you're sitting there, I just want you to sit back, relax, put your feet on the floor, flat on the floor, putting your back into the back of the chair. And if you feel comfortable, just closing your eyes. And as you're sitting there, I just want you to turn your mind to the body and just focus on your feet and your toes. Just want you to let the muscles in your feet and your toes go nice and loose. Just focusing on the lower legs. Again, just letting those muscles go nice and loose and relaxed. Focusing on the upper legs. Noticing any points of tension in the quadriceps or the hamstrings. Just letting that tension go as best you can. Thinking about the stomach and the lower back, a source of tension for many. Just let the muscles in those centers going nice and loose. Turning the mind to the chest and the shoulders. Often the shoulders are hunched up. Perhaps letting them drop a little bit. letting the chest and the shoulders muscles, shoulder muscles go nice and loose. Thinking about your arms now. Just focusing on your upper arms, your forearms, hands and fingers. Letting your arms fall loosely by your side or loosely in your lap. Whatever works for you. Just letting the whole arms go nice and loose and relaxed. Focusing on the neck, head and facial muscles. Perhaps letting any tension go in the neck as best you can. Letting the scalp muscles let go a little. Letting the forehead let go. The muscles around the eyes loosening up. The jaw opening slightly. Just letting all the muscles in the neck, the head and the face go nice and loose and relaxed. And now just thinking about the whole body. Let the whole body sink into the chair. Let the whole body go nice and loose and relaxed. And just for a moment, sitting in silence. Just reconnecting with the feet and the toes, lower legs, the upper legs, stomach, back, chest, shoulders, arms, hands and fingers, the neck, head, facial muscles. Just thinking about the room that you're in, the conversation we've been having today, and just when you're ready, opening your eyes. So as you're sitting there, hopefully you can stay loose and relaxed. Just wanting you to check in with your stress temperature and just think about how you're feeling. Perhaps it's taken the edge off a little bit, but also it might give you that bit of extra confidence to feel that you could have those "are you okay" conversations that we'd need to be having with people. And they're of course a lot easier to do when we're feeling relaxed ourselves. So hopefully that's been of use. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I share a lot of reminders about this, so you're welcome to use me as a wellbeing anchor if that's of use. And again, all the best in this difficult period, and I hope to see you again online sometime soon. Thanks very much.